Okay, so we have a new 2025 Ford Explorer. It's a mid-cycle refresh, so it's not a completely new Explorer, but when you look at the interior, it's very hard to tell if this is a brand new one or just a facelift because it's some substantial changes to the interior design, which I actually like. The exterior, though, that is where it gets a little tricky for me. So we're gonna have a look, and we're gonna show you exactly what the changes are from a front, side, rear, and also the interior. Before we do that, let's have a look at this article from Car and Driver, linked down below, and let's see what this is all about. So 2025 Ford Explorer gets a new look and a better infotainment system. Fresh faces on all the trim levels, a 13.2-inch touchscreen, and hands-free drive modes. And every Explorer now has a fully digital gauge cluster, which looks great. What I do wonder about how they designed the gauge cluster, because when you look at the integration, it looks very strange with the things that are on the side of it. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. So it's mechanically unchanged. All the powertrain is exactly the same that you had last year, but they also trimmed some of the trim levels. Went down to 4. You have active ST line, Platinum, and the top of the line ST. The ST, the previous one of the best looking SUVs in this size, in my opinion. And what they did here is they removed the one design feature that I was in love with the previous pre-facelift ST, and I have to show you that as well. So while we don't know the fate of the off-road oriented Timberline, a Ford spokesperson told Car and Driver that the company is currently developing the most off-road capable Explorer, with more details to be revealed later this year. So it's probably going to be a Timberline version eventually, with some upgrades and with some off-road goodies on it. So you have a large grille now, and this grille is also something that I'm not sure. I don't think I like this new front end over the previous one. For a bunch of reasons that I'm gonna hold off for now and talk about in Photoshop. So you have a larger grille, new headlights as well, a front bumper that mimics a skid plate, to help identify the initial Ford trims, Ford gives each a distinct grille. So you have a different grille design. This is the Platinum here, you can see different from what we have in the ST. The taillights has also been revised, and I do like what I see here. I'm gonna compare this to the old one, and they look cooler, and now they're connected by a horizontal element that includes Explorer script, and it's partially illuminated. You also have a black painted roof from factory if you want to. That's an option now. I think it looks cool with the black roof, honestly. There are fresh paint options as well, and newly available wheel designs. Wheel designs. That's the key feature here, specifically with the ST. So the performance-minded ST introduces magnetite, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, painted 21-inch wheels, upgraded brakes with red painted calipers. You can see those right here. All models come standard with the rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive as an option. And you do, of course, want to have all-wheel drive for your Explorer. And then the active ST line and now the Platinum have a 300 horsepower 2.3 liter 4-cylinder, and the ST still has a 3-liter twin-turbo V6 with 400 horsepower. You also have a 10-speed automatic, or for both engines. Now this is the new interior here, and it looks pretty clean. Still, this integration though with the iPad here on the dash, you see there's no integration for it. It just sits here by itself, no connection to anything else in the interior. But it is 12.3 for the gauge cluster, brand new gauge cluster here. 13.2 infotainment screen. The redesigned dashboard has been pushed forward to make the front seat area feel more spacious. You also have dual wireless charging pads down, or maybe it's up here or down here. I'm not entirely sure. And the good thing about a digital gauge cluster is, of course, you can customize it however you like. So you can have the entire map on the screen, Audi style, which is fantastic. And last but not least, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are both standard now. The pricing starts at $41,220 for the active, and the top of the line ST tops out at $56,800. So let's jump in Photoshop here. Let's have a look at this design. What did Ford do with the Explorer? The front end is what we're going to start with. I think this is obviously the biggest changes for the exterior design. I was a huge fan of this design because I think it has a classic look, but it still has a very modern look to it as well, because we do have this big LED up here. This is the daytime running light, just a simple bar up top. Does look like we do have maybe some LED headlights here, but the integration of everything and the framing for it is beautifully done, because this grille feels nimble, feels light and nimble. It doesn't feel heavy. And you also have a separated intake here. So instead of stretching the grille all the way down to this point, they created a separate intake, just a small bar, which then has a connection to the fog light. So have a look at this. They go all in the same line here, connecting into the same dimensions and thickness of the fog lights, then has the same thickness and the opening for the grille that we have in the middle. It's a beautiful design. And I also like one feature up top is that we have this clear starting point. This line, everything underneath here, this is the clear starting point for where all the graphics happen, underneath that line up top. Last but not least, at the very low section, we do have some openings down there. Now look what they did here with the new Explorer. This area right here becomes a lot more complex and does not look as good as the previous pre-facelift version. You can see what I talked about. Just talked about this small little bar intake. Well, that means that Ford didn't have to extend the grille all the way down here, but that's exactly what they did in the new facelift. So that means that we don't have this clear bumper separation anymore. It's just a thin piece. It looks pretty good still, but we now also don't have any connection to the fog light graphics. Now it's just a simple element on the side here that doesn't really feel like it's connected to anything else in this area like we had in the pre-facelift. And also the grille, this area, this line is way too complicated for me, because we have this curvature down here, we have a curvature going up here, and another curvature right in this area to house the headlights. To me, it's not an improvement over the pre-facelift. The headlights also now has more of a weird shape to them. So we have a dip right in this area, so it dips down a little bit right there, but we still have the same type of daytime run lights, being the two bars up top, and we still have, thankfully, this starting line of the graphics going all the way up here, and everything underneath it, that is the starting point for the graphics. Still a pretty good looking design, but it looks more messy than the pre-facelift, in my opinion. Now, the side view, unfortunately I couldn't find a picture of these, specifically not the new one where the wheels are not rolling. But the key thing, the key graphics that I love about the 2020 ST is, first of all, the proportions look great. We have a sharp corner up here going down, dipping, sloping further down. You can see how it gets narrow here and taller here, creating more of a wedge design, creating a movement forward even when the car is standing still. We have a nice little line down here connecting from the side into the bumper as well. Beautifully done. But these wheels, these 21-inch wheels, were some of the best looking wheels on any SUV throughout history that I've seen, and that comes from Ford, and they're also black. So normally I'm not into black wheels, but on the Ford Explorer ST I just felt like they looked so good. Simple, I think it was 6 or 7, maybe something like that, spoke design. And the weird thing here is, this is a good example of how you can create the spoke design, and when you do that, you can make the wheel look bigger than it actually is. Audi used to be masters on this with the old RS wheels, the 5-spoke beautiful designs. And here, these are 21-inch, and these are also 21-inch, but these look like 18s now, because they switched up the design. I would love to have the same wheels still going in the 2025 ST, because these look so much better than they do on the new ST with the 21-inch wheels with the new design. But overall, the new colors look great, and we also have a connection here. Same type of styling that we have in the pre-facelift. Of course, they're not going to change the bodywork of this, since this is just a mid-cycle refresh. Now, last but not least, before we jump into the interior, the rear view. The rear view, this is probably the exterior piece that I think might look better than the pre-facelift. Not a lot of changes here. The big changes, of course, happen in the taillights. I was a huge fan of these taillights of the pre-facelift, because we have a nice big juicy LED going all across here, and it sort of like clamps. If it looks like two metal industrial clamps just holding the rear graphics together on both sides here, just clamping in to the body, looking great. We also have this lower diffuser. However, these exhaust exhaust pipes are unfortunately fake. I made a video on the ST a while back and someone told me that these exhausts are actually fake, even though they look like proper quad exhausts. So the look is there, but the functionality, I guess, is not. So looking at the new one, we do have this bar now. Thankfully, Ford didn't fall for the temptation of just creating a full light bar, so stretching these LEDs all the way across. Instead, we do have the Explorer letters in this centerpiece, which I think looks pretty good. I also do like these new taillights. We have some piece now sticking into the deck lid itself, but they kept the big juicy LED right here. It doesn't have this clamp design, so it doesn't stick out in the bottom like we have in this case, but it still looks relatively good and not big changes. The pre-facelift was already very beautiful in the rear, and it looks like these are the exact same diffuser that we have in the back like we have in the 2020, meaning that they are most likely still probably fake. Shame on you, Ford. Now looking at the interior, these are of course the biggest changes that we have in the Ford Explorer. This looks to be a later generation of the pre-facelift because we still have a fully digital gauge cluster here. But the overall styling feels almost very 90-ish to me because we have these big curvatures and soft flowing lines, which is typical for not the 90s, but maybe the late 2000s, right? Like 2007, 2008. That is what this interior feels like. And also the steering wheel feels pretty dated when you look at it. But everything else, we have all the functions that I want to see being buttons are buttons here, with the climate control settings right here, the radio, and then we have a relatively small screen. And honestly, I don't need a bigger screen than this. But looking at the new one with the 13.6 or something like that, infotainment screen, this is probably the only piece that I would like to change. I would much rather have a much smaller screen that doesn't stick up this far. See how far up it sticks out above the height of the rest of the dash, and that is what I don't like with these new screens. I do get that it's a big challenge to integrate big screens like this into the dash in a nice way because they're getting so big that they don't know what to do with it, since everything else is supposed to be pretty curved and organic in an interior like this. It's hard to have a static flat piece like that 14 inches just fit beautifully into the interior. It's not the worst integration I've seen. The only thing that I would like changed here is you can see that we do have the climate control settings down here. Fortunately, this looks to be a static bar down there. It doesn't move. They're always going to be visible, the temperature and so on, so you can quickly change it here if you want to. We do have some buttons down here for the traction control. It looks like they have automatic start and stop right here, hazards and so on. So a couple of physical buttons still intact in the Explorer. And here you can see the dual charging pads. We have one here and we have another one down here, I do believe. But they refreshed the gauge cluster to make it a lot more modern. We have more of an industrial feel here. These cushions look funny to me. I don't know why they put, like, just cut off this cushion right here and just crashed into, just end it right there, like with a sword, and then have the gauge cluster just stick out right in the middle of it. But it's still a pretty cool integration. It definitely creates a deep, nice housing for the gauge cluster, which is exactly what I want to see in a digital gauge cluster like this. Even though the previous one was not bad, even though it did have some late 2000s styling to it, we have, it looks like, do we have a new steering wheel or no? I'm not entirely sure if this is new. Do we still have this chamfer here like we have on the old one? I'm not sure, but this steering wheel looks fat and nice, this being the ST. You can see the ST down here on the steering wheel as well. So overall, it's a nice little refresh from Ford for the Explorer. As I've said, I've always been a huge fan of the Explorer, and you can make it look very expensive by just getting the ST, and then you paint the plastic cladding that goes around the wheel arches. You make that body color, and it looks so good. And I would not switch out the black wheels, the 21-inch wheels that we have in the pre-facelift. I would probably just get those wheels and put them on my new Explorer ST if I were to get the 2025 model.